Hi everyone, it's Unfiltered Faith here, and this is week 3 of our Acts of Kindness series. And this week we're going to be looking at God's abundant grace in our own lives, how ridiculously kind He is to us, and how we need to take on that kindness for ourselves. So this week's video is brought to you by Hope Declared. She is an absolutely wonderful person who I was able to meet in real life during the summer, and her heart is just so much for people and so much for encouraging other Christians. And this week we're going to be looking through the devotional that she wrote for us. So there is also a free printable, and if you aren't already subscribed to our mailing list, then I highly recommend that you check out the link in the description below so that you can get all of her devotionals and all of her free printables straight to your inbox. So here I am journaling in 2 Corinthians 12 verse 9, and it says, "But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me." So sometimes it can almost seem too good to be true, God's grace, and we really don't deserve it. We constantly turn from Him and we struggle with sin every day. We fall short of God's glory. But before we let the enemy creep in with those feelings of hopelessness and defeat, we need to remind ourselves that our weakness is not a limitation for God. His grace is sufficient, it is enough, and it is all that we need. In our weakness, God's power is on full display. When we feel overwhelmed and like we just can't keep going, God gives us strength and walks with us. When we fall into temptation, God helps us stand back up and shows us the way forward. When we hurt someone we love, God picks up the pieces, He heals and He restores. When we're tired and burdened, God leads us into green pastures, gives us peace and rest in Him. Now, often when we're doing well, it can be really easy to start celebrating our own strengths, wisdom, perseverance. But when we're weak, we're reminded that all the glory belongs to God. We do all things through and because of God's abundant grace, whether we're feeling strong or able or weak. However, God calls us not only to accept or tolerate our weaknesses, but to boast all the more gladly, as Paul said. If I would count on my fingers the times that I've fallen into feeling like I need to appear put together, or to put all of the focus on the good parts of my day, or brush over the difficulties in my life, particularly from my non-Christian friends, then I would very quickly run out of hands. Surely, portraying my life as a Christian as being easy, always joyful and fulfilling, would help to show them that the fullness of life that God brings is best. God shows us a very different picture here in Corinthians. He hasn't called us to be perfect people. None of us are perfect. He knows that we can't be, but He's called us to rely on and to look to a perfect God who comes into our brokenness with a mighty power. He calls us to be vulnerable, to show the less than polished sides of our lives, and let God's power shine all the brighter in the midst of all of that. So when you next feel like your failings are too big, too hard, or too difficult for God, remember this: you are not an exception to God's abundant grace. His grace is sufficient for you. It's all that you need, and God is using your weakness for His glory. Isn't that just an absolutely amazing devotional that Marie has written for us? And there are so many things that speak so closely to me. You know, that He calls us not to be perfect. I'm very much a person who likes to keep it all together, and you know, it's okay not to be okay. And He calls us to be vulnerable, and He calls us to live out our testimony with power, because by living out our testimony as it is, then His power and His glory can shine through it. So I'd just love to pray with you. Lord, I thank You for Your abundant grace. I praise You for the freedom and power that I can receive through what Jesus has done for me. Thank You that my weakness is not a limitation to Your sovereign power, but that even in my failings, Your glory shines brighter. Help me not to try and lean on my own strength and understanding, but to look to You in all things. Amen. So if you would like to dig a little deeper into this, Marie has written 4 days worth of devotional content, and this was just day 1. There is some really beautiful wisdom within the devotionals that she's created along with God, and some wonderful prayers. She's also given us some reflections, as well as some areas where we might like to dig a little deeper. So if you are the kind of person that loves to journal along with a worship song, which I was definitely doing while I made this video, then O Come to the Altar by Elevation Worship and Grace to Grace by Hillsong Worship are 2 fantastic songs to do whilst you are journaling along to day 1 of the devotional content. And if you want to dig a little deeper, you could go to 1 Timothy 1 verse 14 and have a look a little bit more at the grace that Jesus died to give us. So if we just reflect on some of this content, are there some areas in your life that you've not declared God's grace over yet? I think my answer is most definitely yes. Are there areas of your life where you are attributing the glory to yourself rather than God? I'm afraid I have to be honest, and yes is most probably the answer to that one as well. And in what areas do you want to rely more on God's abundant grace? So I've just been journaling a little bit here with some of the content that we've written, and then I'm also going to add in a tab so that I can write alongside these reflections and just spend time with the Lord and pray through really what he wants to say to me through these pages. So I pray that you've been really blessed by this video. Go and check out Hope Declared on Instagram, go and subscribe and like some of her pages, and just connect with us. We love to hear from you. So take care, God bless, have a lovely week.